nor sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name, or the name of the beast, or the name of the beast, or the name of the beast, or the name of the beast.
At no time did the Prime Minister tell Canadians that he would be ushering in the fourth industrial revolution by completely altering the way that we make policy in this country. I covered in the first video the corporations, countries, and Canadian departments that are part of this WEF-initiated Agile Nations Charter, which is an international network to streamline regulations across borders to advance new technologies. I am now going to highlight a couple of the projects under this WEF Agile Nations Charter within Canada. Coordinating National Standards Body of Agile Nations, Digital Credentials second, the third one is Preloaded Air Cargo Targeting, fourth, Consumer Connected Products, fifth, Experimental Approaches, sixth, Anticipatory Regulation, seventh, Digital Health Software Devices. Today, I'm not going to talk about all of the projects, but I will speak to just the ones that focus on digital credentials and technologies. I received so many letters and calls from many of you on digital IDs, smart cities, and 15-minute cities. And so I want to make sure that we look at digital IDs and technology and the components thereof in the Agile Nations work and programs. These projects aim to increase the global reliance on digital trusted technologies as it says in the government disclosure, their own disclosure. In other words, it's about making it easier for digital IDs to become a part of our permanent daily lives. The Digital Credentials Project is a project that is led by Canada under the Agile Nations that focuses on making digital trust and digital ID technologies more seamless across borders, and they're conducting workshops, proofs of concept, and pilots to make this happen. There's a lot that we don't know about this, which is the problem because it's going back to the lack of transparency that we keep seeing from this Liberal government. The problem that most Canadians have with this expansion and globalization of digital credentials and technologies is that the government can abuse its power when it has access to all of that information. Also, Canadians want to have a choice to opt out of privacy-intrusive digital IDs, artificial intelligence, AI, and smart technologies. They don't want this forced upon them. And it's true that Canadians need protection from potential governmental abuse of their privacy, especially if all of their personal information is stored in one digital identity. I remind you that Prime Minister Trudeau used the Emergencies Act to freeze bank accounts of protesters that criticized him. Maybe if that didn't happen, people would be more trusting of government and digital IDs. We also witnessed the mandatory ArriveCan app and how it discriminated against seniors who didn't have a smartphone. They were fined and some were prevented from getting back into their own country without extensive delays until they downloaded the app and uploaded their personal medical information. Digital IDs cannot be mandatory, especially when the government hasn't addressed its past abuses and when it hasn't ironed out how they are going to prevent future governmental overreach. Most people don't have a problem with digital IDs that I've heard from per se. They are already using their bank cards, credit cards, and digital means of wiring and paying bills. But the problem is that they don't trust the government with access to all of their personal information in one place. Right now, a person can buy something in cash and no one else needs to know about it. No one else can electronically track that. Our credit cards track our purchases, but they don't get sent to the government. You can give your spouse or your children or your friend money and nobody else knows about it. However, with a digital ID, all of this may change in the future. The priority of the Liberal Party should be to assure Canadians that their data will be protected and that there will be sufficient safeguards and checks to protect against government intrusion. So what does a digital ID entail and how does it relate to Agile Nations? Digital ID can be defined as digitally stored identifying information that is used to validate your identity on an online platform. This process uses usernames, passwords, social insurance numbers, national ID numbers, biometric authentication such as fingerprints or facial recognition, and sometimes digital signatures. These digital IDs are tied to your social and economic transactions that you would make in society, such as they can be tied to your driving information, your health card, your banking information, your purchases, and possibly even sensitive information like your religion or your political beliefs. Given the amount of information stored in these digital IDs, there's fear that if it's not properly regulated, digital information can be collected and it may get into the hands of a bad actor, or government could flip a switch and lock you out of access to key services or use your information without obtaining your express consent. When trust is broken, as it was when the government shut down people's bank accounts for protesting, people become hyper concerned about future overreach and any big changes that are not properly explained. People are asking questions like, can a digital ID be used to control or punish political opposition? Or will certain businesses not sell to certain people who have quote unquote unacceptable views, for example, when people were kicked off of social media platforms? Or could that data be programmed into your digital ID? Of course, connected to this is the central bank digital currency, the CBDCs, another mechanism by which government can surveil and monitor you. Once we've moved to digital ID, a central bank digital currency can easily be implemented. With CBDCs, governments could theoretically track everything that you purchase, and the implications of that are, of course, frightening. Will government then tell you how much of an item you can buy, what types of things you can spend your money on, where and when you can travel? Many Canadians are also concerned that the currencies may be programmable, meaning that they could assign an expiry date attached to the currency or other limits on what you can access with that currency. With all the myriad of issues and questions to address, you would think that there would be big policy discussions and legislation brought forward to iron out these challenges. You would also expect that things like digital IDs and central bank digital currencies would not be developed without the ethical framework in place to protect Canadians. The absence of any transparency, of any engagement or consultations with Canadians, or legislation to address these issues and concerns makes it clear that our Prime Minister does not believe that he needs to do anything to protect Canadians' digital identities and freedoms from governmental abuse. The privacy and autonomy of Canadians is extremely important, and unfortunately, the federal government doesn't have the ethical privacy legislation needed to protect Canadians from their own government in this digital age. Once digital information is collected about you, is it de-identified? Does it pass through a third party? Is it anonymized so that it can no longer be connected to you? That is the only way to really ensure privacy. Also, Canadians should be able to meaningfully consent to which portions of their information they want shared and with whom. There is an absence of strong overarching federal legislation or regulation that will set minimum standards and the limits as to what businesses can do with your digital ID and information. The Privacy Commissioner has raised concerns that we have been moving into a digital age and that the legislation to protect privacy in this arena is lagging. If we look at the Personal Information Protection and Electronic Documents Act, PIPEDA, we see that while the focus is on businesses, what's missing is the role of government in setting the standards. The government introduced Bill C-27, the Digital Charter Implementation Act, which is currently before Parliament, but again, it addresses privacy protection in only the private sector and places all the responsibility of digital ID protection on business owners. The federal government should be creating a national, overarching framework that will protect privacy. Instead, it seems that the federal government is just passing the buck to businesses. It's not acceptable for the federal government to push this onto small businesses, adding layers of red tape and punitive measures without leading by example and holding itself to the same standards. If the Liberal government had time to sign a WEF-led Agile Nations Charter in November 2020 during COVID lockdowns and draft legislation to regulate small businesses, then there is no excuse why they should not put in place a national digital charter that protects Canadians from digital ID abuse from both government and from corporations. Family, the signing of the Agile Nations Charter and the work on the Digital Credentials Project that the Liberals have committed us to under the Global Charter clearly shows their intention. We still have a democracy, and we need to stay involved and push back against this domination of the executive branch through the Agile Nations Charter. Because if we don't, we are going to continue to see governments operating below the radar of Canadians and outside of Parliament. Our leader, the Honorable Pierre Poilievre, is listening to your concerns and will not dismiss your questions on digital ID. He has promised that digital ID will never be mandatory. No matter what changes may be occurring in society, you can always be sure that Conservatives will continue to fight to ensure that your personal privacy and autonomy will always be protected. If you would like to help, reach out to your federal representative and let them know that you believe that we need a federal digital charter to protect us against potential governmental abuse of our private digital information. Thank you so much for watching.